NFC East, going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this bitch. So these videos, basically what's about are going to be about what's on the roster now and going to the draft that this team looks like they're going to need. I'm not going to talk a lot about the college side of it, those players. I'm not going to pretend like I've watched a lot of them. And frankly, evaluating them is something I can do once I get to the NFL. And trying to predict it before. I mean, you see how wrong everybody is most of the time, so I'm not even going to bother with it really. The other thing I'll say real quick with these draft needs is I think drafting for need in general is pretty stupid, to be honest with you. A difference maker at one position, no matter the position, basically is better than someone who's not a difference maker at another one. Now, there are very extreme exceptions to this, and there's, of course, the quarterback as opposed to like a kicker, right? There's extremes like that, but basically everything else in between, it's just better to have a good player, no matter if you're already good at that position, no matter what. So that's something to keep in mind, too, when I'm talking about this. But, first, NFC East, like I said, you see the picks on the screen. Again, not going to talk about that a ton. Just kind of a reminder, and it's good for me, too. I keep track of what a team's looking like. But first, Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys as constructed, I mean, and this will be a theme as you'll kind of see as we get through all these teams, is on paper, they're fairly complete as of now. That's the thing with basically all the NFL teams before injuries set in and that type of thing going into the season. A lot of them look really good on paper, and that's the case with the Cowboys. Now, as we'll get to, they are missing some important things on the high end, but overall, they're actually not too bad of a spot. So first thing, you see it right there. And this I think, is the difference in their defense being capable, because they're going to have an elite offense if they stay healthy next year. But the difference in their defense being able to keep up and not is going to be this first thing, which is just a good linebacker. And I'm going to preface this point with saying that they did sign Keanu Neal, who's going to be playing linebacker for them. It looks like not safety. And there's a chance that Keanu Neal is effectively exactly the player that I'm going to be talking about. And if that's the case, then, good on them. I'm not willing to say that. And frankly, the likelihood of him staying healthy to be that player anyway is not high. So, but yeah, basically their issue is, I think last year they were historically bad defense, right? And there were multiple reasons for it. People are going to point out the corner issues, specifically injuries, which is true. They had a revolving door there with Chidobe Awuzie, Jordan Lewis, Anthony Brown, all missing a lot of the season. And their offense being pretty bad, especially the second half of the year once A.D. Dalton came in. They went through some of the offensive line injuries. But what I think that speaks to actually is how quickly they could get better, because neither of those two problems are necessarily embedded in the players that were playing. It's the players who were not playing, right? The problem with players who were playing, and this is what this first point is about, is their linebackers. They put a lot of emphasis on their linebackers to basically matter, right? To do things, to make plays, and the linebackers they have really, really don't. Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, the guys I'm talking about, they just don't do anything is really the problem. So they're both really athletic, right? And they look good because they can clean up a lot of plays like 5 yards down the field. Problem is they both slow play everything all the time. They don't really make plays themselves. Now, I know especially Jalen Smith can have high kind of analytical impact in the backfield, but a lot of that is him getting sent on blitzes and or firing straight forward at horrible in-division run schemes right up the middle. Speaking, the Eagles, Redskins, or football team both do that a lot. But the problem is that against especially these teams like the 49ers, the Rams, the Vikings, the teams that go out of their way to attack linebackers, those two guys just don't get it done. Now they help limit the ceiling, but they really don't make plays in the backfield of their own volition almost ever. And that's really an issue. Now, like I said, Keanu Neal, I think a lot of that can describe him, but as a full-time linebacker with his injury issues, I'm not going to go that far yet. And I think if they were to draft a really good linebacker, you would see a huge difference in their defense really, really quickly. But the second thing, strong safety. So they sign, as far as the secondary overall goes, right, going into the year, and you see the number 3 needed here is a corner too. So kind of secondary in general. But going into this year, as of now, they're not necessarily a disaster. So Trayvon Diggs was pretty good as a rookie. I'm pretty confident that he's going to be a useful player this year. And Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, both back fully healthy. And when they're playing, they're really not too bad. Now, they're not great, and hence the third need being a upper tier corner, because you could upgrade on them fairly easily, but not like instantly, not with anybody, right? And they signed DeMonte KZ from the Falcons, who's like a fantastic player, and he's kind of what Xavier Woods, who let go, free safety, was supposed to be, is ideally, but DeMonte KZ really is that. He's Marcus Williams, he's Kevin Byard, he's these guys who really, really matter down the field, and that's a huge difference. So the one weak spot as of now, as like in terms of the starting players, is this strong safety spot. Now, Donovan Wilson played okay down the stretch, and that's why I don't even think this need is like gigantic, but he's not great for sure. And he's the type of player that I do think you could find guys to at least rotate with him to make them better. And if they were, again, to add a real playmaker at that spot, because this and the linebacker thing, they really fill the same role in terms of they need defenders who do things, who matter, who can proactively make plays, and they're really missing that right now. Number 4 thing, just a nose tackle. On the defensive interior, they were horrible at the beginning of last year because they, for some reason, employed Dontari Poe, who at that point in his career was man, I don't know if I've ever seen a player get blown off the ball so consistently and so far than like the first 3 weeks last year, Dontari Poe. But now on roster, I was going to say, okay, I don't even know if that's the word. They have somebody there, Neville Gallimore. Now, I'm not impressed with him at all from last year. He really didn't show me anything to make me think he's going to be a meaningful piece and productive defense. Now, he's not terrible, but as far as drafting, that's the easy thing you can get. And that's something that they do need. As far as the 3 technique, though, the other defensive tackle, they're better there between the signing of Brett Urban, Carlos Watkins, and they have Tristan Hill probably coming back from injury. All those guys can at least do things. Now, that'd be a slight need, too. I didn't really include here because I think you can survive with what they have, but that's another thing to take note of. As far as the next stuff, I mean, this is all kind of minor things, right? Like I said, when healthy, they're really not doing too bad. But first thing, center, as far as these other things goes, that's clearly the weak spot on their offensive line as of now. Healthy, they're going to be elite again. La'el Collins, one of the best tackles in football. Tyron Smith, way up there too. Zach Martin, I think, is pretty notably overrated in terms of all these top guards are, because people act like they're perfect, like they're gods. That's really not what happens. They still lose, those 2 specifically. But he's still better than a lot of guards. And Connor Williams, not a problem, really. And, I mean, overall, the Cowboys' offensive line, the guys that played last year are really not bad. The problem was once they got to their, like, 3rd and 4th string guys. But Terrence Steele, Brandon Knight, both of the swing tackles that played last year, can play. They really can. And they signed Ty Nsekhe from the Bills, who's been able to play for forever. He's just been probably the best swing tackle in the NFL for, 3-4 years. So they're really strong on the offensive line. The one spot is center. Joe Looney is mediocre at best, and Tyler Biadasz, a lot of people were excited about him last year. It turns out he fell to the 4th round or 5th round for a pretty good reason. He's pretty bad. Now, could he get a little bit better? Yes. Is he bad enough to tank everything? No. That's why his need's not super high, but that is the one spot on offense specifically, as well as the next thing being a tight end who actually matters, where I think they could get better. Now, the likelihood of drafting a tight end who really matters in the draft, not high, but that is the one thing on their roster offensively that is missing, because Blake Jarwin, they signed Jeremy Sprinkle, Dalton Schultz. None of those guys are bad. All of them are capable of being members of an NFL offense, but none of them matter is the problem. The only other thing then, behind Zach Martin, Connor Williams at guard, they really don't have anything. Connor McGovern showed he just cannot play. He was, I would argue, maybe the primary issue last year for the Cowboys at guard, or on offensive line in general. But, yeah, so with the Cowboys, they're really not too far, and they have an elite offense as is. So that's what they're looking like. Then on to the Giants. And, again, you're looking at a team that, frankly, not too bad going into the year. I didn't think they were going to be too bad going into last year either, which of course proved to be the case. Not that they were great or anything, but I really think that they were not a super easy win. And that's the case as of now going into this year too. Now, there are some maybe bigger holes on this roster than there were on the last one, but there's also some really encouraging stuff. So the first thing, defensively, they really need an edge rusher. The guys on the roster, it's just no one I care about. And I know all of them. And the problem is none of them do anything similar to the Cowboys guys, but at a worse spot to be off at in this case. None of them actually can rush the passer with any level of frequency. Lorenzo Carter, Fedi Adenabo, they sign. Ryan Anderson, they sign. Cam Brown, none of them are good. Now, they can all do some things, and actually a lot of them play the run pretty well, which is an advantage that the Giants have, but they're missing a guy who at basically any point is going to be able to provide any level of consistent pass rush. Even O'Shane Ximines, who was a higher draft pick, I think the year before, they use him more off-ball linebacker at this point, despite being drafted as an edge rusher. And they're just really, really missing something there. Now, that's a hard thing to find again. especially in the draft in their first year. But that's by far the biggest thing on this team that's missing. The second thing, they really need another guard. So they signed – so their offensive line. And it's an interesting spot overall because you see that they're on here a couple times. Andrew Thomas started out the year last year, but he actually ended up being pretty good. I'm comfortable with him there, left tackle. And at right tackle, actually, I really liked what I saw from Matt Peart when he played just drafted last year as well by the Giants, I believe, in the third round. He was pretty good. Now, he's not elite and everything, and obviously if he's going to be thrown in there for a lot more snaps, there could be problems that just didn't show up before. But I'm actually pretty comfortable with their tackles here. And frankly, even at guard, Shane Lemieux was really good when he played. So that's three spots that I'm solid with. Nick Gates, their center, I didn't like the beginning of last year. I didn't think he was very good. He grew on me a little bit as the year went on. I don't think he's quite a disaster now. He still has some noticeable issues, but he actually reminds me a lot of maybe like a older career Alex Mack at this point, and that's not a huge compliment, but it's definitely not a big roast. So there's that too. The other problem though, is that other guard spot. Like I said, they signed Zach Fulton. He's horrible. The Texans' offensive line generally was hated on too much previously. Deshaun Watson caused most of their issue, 50-50, maybe most. He caused a lot of issues for them. And a lot of them were actually a lot better than people think they are. The one who wasn't, pretty specifically, there was two, Nick Martin, now with the Raiders, and Zach Fulton, who was bad. He's just bad. So whether it's going to be him, Will Hernandez, maybe they give Kenny Wiggins a shout. I think that's what they should do. But either way, they're going to have a lackluster player starting there, which could be an issue. Now, a guard, if a guard is one of your top needs, it's generally positive, but that's, I think, the main thing there. The next one, really missing a true safety presence. They have Xavier McKinney, just drafted last year, and Jabril Peppers. Both players I actually like and I think are pretty good. Problem is, neither of them is going to provide that like deep safety center fielder type thing, which I think is actually really valuable in the NFL. And there's frankly not that many of them. So again, not a huge deal because most teams are missing this, but if they could get that, it would help a lot because I do like their defense in the way it's set up a whole lot next year. Outside of their pass rush. And I will mention too with that even that they showed that the defensive coordinator there could actually generate some pass rush with, subpar talent fairly well, especially in the second half of last year. So will mention that. And they do have pass rush from the interior. Their front three is still really, really good, even without Dalvin Tomlinson, Austin Johnson, BJ Hill, Rocky McIntosh, or Jay McIntosh. I'll step in and play, but a true free safety would be good. The one they have now, Julian Love, drafted as a corner. Not horrible back there, actually, but you could do better. Other things, though, I mean, their outside corner depth, not great. James Bradbury, Adoree Jackson should be pretty good as starting to, especially Bradbury. He's a borderline elite guy. But other than past him, I mean, Ryan Lewis played decent actually last year, but, he's a little smaller. And is he necessarily a guy you want full-time starting? I don't know. And then besides that, it's like Isaac Adams, terrible or something like that. So that's a big one. And then linebacker depth as well. They have Blake Martinez, not great, but actually in this defense, I do think they covered his weaknesses pretty well, and he can do some things as a between the tackle run stopper. And the other guy, I mean, they have Tate Crowder, who last pick of the draft last year was like noticeably good as a linebacker, even as a rookie last year, who should be full-time starting next year. I think he played in – he was injured for the middle part of last year. By the time he came back, he was getting a lot of snaps. I think he should be, and they know that. But they do need depth behind them. There are other guys. They signed Reggie Ragland, who's bad. He's just worse. Blake Martinez, Devontae Downs, really, really bad. Guy who played a lot last year because there's nobody else to play. But again, overall with the Giants, I mean, you're not in a terrible situation going forward here. And I'll mention, I obviously did not mention the quarterback. I don't love Daniel Jones, but the likelihood with where the Giants are drafting of them getting somebody who's a lot better than him, I think are very, very low. And frankly, with the offense he could have set up around him next year, he could start to look pretty good. And I don't really like Kenny Golladay all that much. I think he's kind of overrated himself. But between him, Darius Slay, and Sterling Shepard, there's enough there that I think Daniel Jones can function there. So I'll just mention that's why I don't have quarterback on here. Next up, the Washington football team. So notably, compared to the last one, you'll see at the top here is quarterback. Now, why is that? Right? Why do I not even have a list for the Giants and it's the number one for the football team? There's a couple of reasons. Mainly because the football team's roster is just better all around, so there's less need for me to put above that. And the other reason is, of course, because Daniel Jones, as a first rounder, who I at least have some faith in to perform, is on the Giants. On the football team here, you just have freshly signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's like 40 years old, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke. Now, I will throw in here that I do think Taylor Heineke is pretty damn good. I'm not surprised that happened against the Buccaneers in the playoffs. He showed clearly some really good things in the games that he had played in the regular season going into that game and in that game as well, obviously. So I will mention that. And even Kyle Allen, I think, is at least you can get away with starting him and not being a horrible team for sure. But they are missing a clear guy for sure. They're missing a top end talent. None of these guys, no matter what happens outside of maybe a tiny chance of the Heineke, are going to end up being something that I really care about as far as like a top 10, 15 guy. And as soon as that's the case, quarterback's the number one thing. Number two, though, linebacker for sure. You're looking at a defense that is really good. Now, there are some things missing overall that I'm going to get into, but the main one is they need linebackers who don't suck. Now, right now they have two. John Bostic is close to sucking, but that's a little harsh. He's not that bad. He's just really slow, really lacks sideline range, and certain teams, again, those sideline teams that are taking over the NFL now, 49ers, Rams, Vikings, that type of thing. He struggles with them, and he's really bad in pass coverage, right? But he actually at least can do some useful things. And I will mention Cole Holcomb, I think, is really good as their other linebacker. That's a start for sure. But if that's your top guys, right, then you need something there. And they're in a good position to take someone like that, I think. And it's not terribly hard to find a good linebacker, but for sure, that's the number one thing outside of quarterback for them. Other than that, they are still starting one pretty bad guard. Their offensive line as a whole, pretty decent. No notable, horrible spots outside of the one, that being Wes Schweitzer / Wes Martin, mainly Schweitzer. I mean, he played the vast majority of the second half of the year. At left guard, now I will mention he's not quite as bad as I expected him to be. Going into the year, once I found out he was going to be playing, God, I was worried to say the least. He was horrible in the Falcons, and that was not the case with the football team. Now, he wasn't great or even really good, but he wasn't horrible. Though you could upgrade that spot very quickly, very easily, and very significantly. So there's that. And even the other guys, right? Brandon Scherf, a guy who's on the franchise tag, who does some things really well. He even has kind of similar issues to earlier, like Zach Martin earlier that I talked about in this division. He's still pretty good, though, for sure. But he's on a franchise tag, so going forward, you're kind of missing just roster talent on the interior in general, which is definitely something to notice, hence why it's second here. There's a nice typo there. Rotational edge, the next need. So there, people are going to, I think of all the takes I'm going to say in this video, this is maybe the main one people are going to be upset about. And it's the football team's pass rush, right? Well, as a unit is good and better than a lot of the teams in the league, they are still really missing a high-end number one pass rusher. Now, that's, there's like 3 or 4 of them in the NFL, and people are going to point out, well, they have Chase Young. And hate to break it to you, Chase Young is not that guy. He does a lot of things really, really, really well, and I think he's going to be, for a good reason, a perennial All-Pro, Pro Bowler, all that type of thing. But not a first-team guy, not a second-team guy. He's going to be a step below that. He's really similar in my mind to DeMarcus Lawrence, younger DeMarcus Lawrence, Cameron Jordan, players who are really good, who do matter. He definitely matters, but who do not create pass rush the way that Von Miller does, Neil Hunter does, the Bosa brothers do. And there's a real difference in those tiers. Now, can Young grow into that? I kind of doubt it myself, but I guess it's possible. But that is the thing that they're mainly missing, especially if Kerrigan's gone. With just Young, Montez Sweat, James Smith-Williams on the edge, you are missing a huge edge rush threat. Now, that being this high, again, shows this is a pretty good roster overall, but that is something that they are missing here. Next thing, cornerback 2, and that's more of at this point, this is more of the depth stuff. They signed William Jackson. I have a lot of respect for. I think he's a true on the medium tier of true number one corners. But other than him, they are kind of missing a true outside number 2. I like Jimmy Moreland and Kendall Fuller is really good for sure, but neither of them necessarily out boundary corners. They play all over the field, which is a good thing. I do like that, but they are missing if a team comes out 2 number 1 receivers. they're going to struggle a little bit with whoever Jackson's on. Not that he's like, he's not Darrell Revis himself for sure, but that's the thing. I do sign Darrell Roberts, I think, can fill in there, but overall, just going forward, I think that's a spot that they could upgrade on. Other than that, I mean, tight end 2, Logan Thomas showed he can be a starting tight end in the NFL. Does he actually matter? No. Very few tight ends do. He's not a guy who creates his own separation or creates his own offense. Really, he's not horrible at it. He's better than a lot of guys, but behind, I don't want to roast him. That's not what it's about. Behind him, they don't have very much or really anything. Marcus Baugh, Tamaris Hemingway, neither of them have shown me anything that I necessarily care about. They're actually both okay blockers, but that's a spot, if anything. Again, I'm kind of reaching at this point for needs on this team. They're not too bad. And a tackle, too. I like their tackles, actually, but they're either older on short contracts or not elite, so that would be another spot to, if they wanted to take shots at, I wouldn't mind at all. But overall, I mean, yeah, this team – They have the tools, again, to be pretty good next year, although I do like the other rosters we talked about. I think specifically the Cowboys better. But the last one in the NFC East here. And last but not least, and I think maybe the most interesting one, maybe I shouldn't have saved this for the end, the Philadelphia Eagles. Because as opposed to these other teams, which are fairly well-rounded rosters with some high-end talent missing, this one has the presence of some of the higher-end talent, but has some gigantic, just terrible holes that if they go into next year with the current rosters they have are going to make them a really bad team. Now, I'm going to start with the positives first before I get this stuff on here. If healthy, the guys they have in their offensive line are still very elite. Brandon Brooks, best guard in football. Frankly, I don't think it's close. Quentin Nelson Brandon Brooks does all the things Quentin Nelson does without the bad losses, basically, which – whatever, I don't want to get too much into. Basically, if he's healthy, you're set there. And there are other guys. I mean, Isaac Seumalo can play. He really can. Nate Herbig showed he can play. Now he has some more issues. But between them, Jason Kelsey coming back, who's an elite center, Lane Johnson, really good tackle, Jeremiah Latta, who can play, and frankly, Andre Dillard, who missed all last year. And for some reason, Eagles fans were sour on him before that, which I completely disagree with. I think that guy is really, really good. Every time he was on the NFL field, almost every time, especially as a rookie tackle, he showed me that he can stand up really well. And I would be excited for him if I was the Eagles fan or whoever ends up with them, because there's been some talk about him being let go because of injuries and stuff like that. But point is, you can make a really good offensive line out of that. And they still have Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, who are both really good, especially Goddard at this point is, a very, very elite tight end. On the defensive end, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave. But it kind of ends there because everywhere else on this roster, really, really bad. Really, really bad. So first thing, corner. They don't have any good corners, right? On this defense, they have just overall in the secondary overall, they have one good player and one okay player. The good player being Anthony Harris, the safety they just brought in from the Vikings, and the okay player being Darius Slay, who no, I didn't forget about him. I know he's there, but problem with Darius Slay, right, is at this point in his career, you're talking about a number one corner who can't meaningfully cover any number one receivers like ever. Now, he can mitigate them more than other number one corners can, and I don't think he's horrible, hence why I didn't include him in the horrible category. But problem is, no matter what good receiver you throw against him, that good receiver is going to have an advantage, and that's just not what you want out of the number one corner. So that's an issue. And behind him, there's absolutely nothing. I mean, Avonte Maddox is bad. Michael Jackett had some okay things that maybe not hate him, but I don't want him to be a starter or even close to it. And in the secondary, like I said, while Anthony Harris is really good, their other safeties are horrible. Marcus Epps might have been the worst safety I saw play last year. That's not, Andrew Sendejo or Andrew Wingard. And other than him, Kayvon Wallace didn't impress me. Rookie out of Clemson. Ronnie McLeod is a old player who wasn't that good to start with, coming off an ACL tear. You have 1.5 players in the entirety of the secondary. That's a disaster, absolute disaster. And that's not as easy to fix as these other ones we've been talking about. That's maybe a barrier to this team even being competitive next year, to be honest. But next we can get to the other horrible barrier to them being competitive, which is their lack of really good receivers. Now, this I'm going to fight back a little bit with kind of the public opinion about how awful these receivers are. I don't think they're quite that bad. Jalen Reagor, now, compared to the other receivers in the first round of the draft, pretty disappointing. But just as a player himself, I did think he showed that he's going to be able to get open deep. He has skills as a punt returner, run after catch guy, and even as a route runner, like / true receiver, he's not the end of the world. And then John Hightower, who I want to talk about. I really like John Hightower. I think the Eagles made a mistake and kind of getting away from it at the end of the year because he was getting thrown terrible, uncatchable stuff by Carson Wentz all the time. Now, he did have a couple notable drops for sure, but to get to those, like for those drops to happen, if you watch what happened on those plays, he made really good plays and he consistently created space. And John Hightower is really good, is the point. Are they going to lean on him? I doubt it, just because of his draft capital and how they kind of treated him last year, but I just want to mention that. But other than that, I mean, that's where it kind of ends. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, horrible pick. One of the most useless receivers in the NFL. He's good at the one skill that isn't even that useful in the first place, and he can't do anything else. Travis Fulgham, a guy who basically lived off Carson Wentz's jump balls. While he's kind of like, he's the really, really bad Tyler Lockett. Now, I'm not trying to roast Travis Fulgham that much. What I mean, though, is he struggles to actually create for himself, but his quarterback being off schedule does unlock some things that he's actually better at than other receivers that makes him look better than maybe he is on a traditional offense. Not that that's a useless skill, but that's not something that leads to consistent success for your offense. And then Greg Ward, kind of similar thing. Now the actual skill set isn't the same. He's not like after the play breaks type of guy, but not a receiver matters. So you have two guys who are reasonable or whatever. Point is, they're really missing high-end talent. They're missing guys who are going to consistently create yards for the offense. And that's a huge problem. And as soon as you have that in the modern NFL at those spots, those first three spots there, I mean, you're just kind of sunk no matter what you do. Now, could they get real lucky, draft some really good guys there? Yeah, but that's a real issue. Other than that, they're missing high-end edge players. Brandon Graham at this point, pretty old. Derek Marnett not living up to a first round as a pass rusher. He does some okay things. I do like Josh Sweat and Gennard Avery's backup guys. I'm not going to roast this position group too much, but kind of similar to the football team, that we just talked about. They're just missing the high end at this point. And the only other thing, this is a tiny thing, defensive tackle depth. Outside of Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, they have Hassan Ridgeway, Raekwon Williams. Both guys I thought were really, they're okay. But that would be the only little tiny thing. But at the top end of this, I mean, there's a clear difference between this roster and the other ones that going to the draft is a lot harder to fix. And that's what it's looking like for the NFC East going into the 2021 NFL draft.